This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode, where my guests are Caroline and Jon Edwards. Over the past few years, Caroline and Jon have created the most amazing swimming pond in their back garden and have documented their journey on social media, posting videos of year-round swimming adventures and pond life. If you need inspiration to tackle a garden project you've always thought was just a pipe dream, listen in as Caroline and Jon offer their refreshingly optimistic and can-do approach.
A number of years ago, we decided, I got a bit fed up, keep cutting the grass. And I've been sort of researching sort of ponds and pond building and came across this concept of natural swimming pools. And I thought, that sounds like a great idea. Why don't I replace all the grass with a natural swimming pool? And then on a hot summer's day, we can have a little paddle around and a swim, and that'll be lovely. And it saves me cutting the grass every week. That's how it started. I think 5 years later, I probably should have just kept some grass. I think it would have been a lot less effort.
Can you just describe the size of it as well, the size of your pool? And does it actually, as it appears in videos, does it actually fill the entirety of your back garden?
Yeah, so we've actually got quite a long, thin garden. We're very fortunate, actually. We've got quite a big garden, but it's very long and very thin, and it's also on a hill. So from front to the back of the house is about a one-story drop, which makes life somewhat difficult. And I suppose the garden in length in total is probably a couple of 100 feet. And I would think it's probably 50 or 60 feet wide. And I would say the pool we built probably takes up just under half of that space, I would say. And it's roughly about, I'm going to go back into metric mode now, about 14 meters at its longest and about 9 meters at its widest. And the swimming area is just over 2 meters deep. So it's a fairly sizable object in the garden, I would say.
Yeah. It dominates, but it dominates in a really beautiful way. But it hasn't always been like that. So Jon suddenly one day hired a digger. I had no idea that we were going to be doing this, but he loves sort of suddenly doing big challenges like that. So it didn't surprise me. And I was actually quite excited about the thought of it until he started digging it. And obviously there's tons and tons of earth that had to come out of that hole. And we had 3 dogs at the time, and suddenly their garden they had nowhere to run. It was devastating.
It did look like a battlefield at one point. I think, again, you forget when you start digging soil, obviously that soil expands sort of 3 or 4 times in terms of volume. And I hadn't quite appreciated, stupidly looking back at it, as Caroline was saying, it was very much a sort of spur of the moment, right, let's do it now. And Caroline was initially supportive until she saw these mounds and mounds of soil everywhere. And I thought, my God, I'm going to get rid of it all. So we ended up sort of building up the levels down the lower part of the garden and making a bit of a bank to sort of keep the pond retained. Because, as I said, we live on a hill. And of course, the further you start digging, you've got to sort of build up the ground level as you go further down the garden, if you see what I mean. So, it was quite an enormous piece of landscaping, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think our neighbours, they kept sort of looking over the fence to see what on earth we were doing, because it's very unusual. I mean, a few people up here have got normal pools, chlorine-filled pools, turquoise pools, and they could see us digging and digging and digging. I don't think they knew what on earth we were trying to achieve. Yeah. And nor did I at the time. Yeah,
they've got these sort of manicured gardens all around us. And then, again, it reminded me a bit like The Good Life, where Tom and Barbara suddenly started rotivating their back garden, and Margot and Jerry were watching on in horror. I think we had a similar sort of experience, and particularly, as I said, we were trying to level the ground for the pool to go down. And at one point, I think I met the neighbour over the fence, and he was staring at my knees on a mound of mud. So, that was quite an interesting conversation. But, they all took it in very good spirit.
Yeah, they must have done. I mean, I'm guessing it didn't cause any problems in terms of, additional runoff into their gardens where you changed the levels and things.
No. So we sort of cut and filled where the slope was, and quite a few people have done that. And actually, again, on the left of us, they'd done that with the swimming pool where they struggled to dig it. They ended up raising the ground. So, again, they were great, no problems at all. And we made sure all the water runoff and the overflows were done to sort of soakaways and other parts of the garden where it was going to cause a problem. So, it worked out very well.
That is quite a feat of engineering. Did you do it all yourself, and did you have experience in that?
Well, bizarrely, back in the day, I was actually a heating engineer. So we're quite like messing around with pipes and plumbing and all that sort of stuff. So I thought, it can't be that difficult. So I read lots of books But I think, yeah, it's the scale. So I think I've got an optimistic view on things. It's only when you start getting into the dirty of it all, you think, oh my goodness, what have I actually taken on here? And then when you go to work and you come back and you see the garden looking like the Somme, it's, yeah, there were quite a few moments where I thought, oh my goodness, what have I actually done here?
And you can't turn back, because once you've removed all the soil, you can't put it back in.
Well, you could, but you're
Well,
quite
we
committed.
could. We were committed at that point.
And I was trying to make sure that I was looking confident at all times in front of Caroline, because I didn't want to show there's any doubt or fear in me at that point. So yes, I'd say I'm quite an active DIY. I like big projects, and I like sort of challenging myself to do things by learning and researching and see how things work and see what you can achieve.
But he also likes it to look aesthetically beautiful, which is the thing that I absolutely love. So the space is so stunning the way he's done it, actually, because it just looks so picturesque and beautiful, even in the winter. And that's what we love about the pond, is that all year round it looks absolutely stunning. You know, in the winter we swim in it. John dips, he's very Wim Hofy and gets in that freezing cold water, and so do I. And autumn, it looks beautiful. I mean, autumn's, you know, a lot of leaves fall in, so I have to go in and get the leaves out. But generally all year round you've got this beautiful changing, ever-changing thing in the garden, which just goes through the seasons with you. So it looks really beautiful out there.
And it's funny actually how water, and I always hoped this would be the case, because I think we've always loved being by the sea and by being, you know, near water. And I think they say that water gives a lot of, you know, negative ions off, which again is very good for your well-being and mental health. And it's actually really true. And I think the space has completely transformed from pretty much a normal urban garden with grass that, you know, we're very lucky to have that. But actually, when you put water with it, something magic happens, I think. And as Caroline was saying, how it changes and evolves with the season, it's an ever moving landscape.
The wildlife. So we've got newts. We've got so many beautiful things now that have come to find us, really. I mean, we never had newts before, but now in the spring we get them, and they leave in August, don't they? Leave the pond
Summer,
and it's
yeah.
in the summer. And, you know, beautiful dragonfly, deer come and drink from it at night. I mean, it's just absolutely stunning.
Yeah. And you wonder where all these things must have gone before. So literally within the space of 3 weeks, suddenly the pool's full of newts. I'm like, well, where were they before? It's bizarre.
And I love that they found us. That's so cute, I think.
Thousands of them in there. So yeah, and again, it's it's just a really nice thing to have, and it just creates such a balance to the garden.
And actually, I think it's becoming more popular, because when we first started the build 5 years ago, I had an Instagram account, and some people loved it, but other people like, oh, that's so weird, you must be swimming with snakes, and oh, that's really creepy. But I've recently, just a month ago, put the pond onto TikTok, and we've got millions of viewers that absolutely love it. And it's very rare that we get people that say, oh God, you're swimming in a swamp. Whereas 5 years ago, people didn't really get the concept. And I think, you know, people are, with the cold swimming craze, I think people are getting much more into this whole natural way of being without chemicals, which is what we've achieved.
Talking of the newts, that was actually one of my questions that I was going to ask you further on. And that is, how do you cope with wildlife? And your house is, as you say, the whole thing is beautiful, and your house naturally kind of integrates with the pond as well, and the whole thing just flows from one to the other. And I wondered how much it flows back the other way. Do you actually end up with things like midges or newts in your house? You know, can you shut it out when you want to?
I think, again, Karen gets quite a lot of comments about mosquitoes, you know, and all that sort of, but actually I can honestly say the water is very clean and very fresh.
It's not stagnant. So mosquitoes would be attracted to stagnant water, and it's got this flow of air going through it. So the wildlife is always a joy. We always think it as a, you know, we're lucky that they've come and they're in there, really, and that we've created something that is drawing them in. So we don't get a house full of midges, definitely nothing horrible. We get the bats coming down to drink from it at night, which we just love it. We're just a bit in.
Yeah, and that's what's amazing. You just sit there on a summer's evening or on a winter's day, or just sit on the deck and you just watch. It's quite mesmerising in many ways. That's what I'm saying. It's not just, you know, the newts, it's water striders, it's it's just teeming. I mean, I don't pretend I'm an expert on wildlife at all, but you just sit there and think, what's that? And then you get your phone out and take a picture of it, and you think, well, it's just incredible. You know, it really is a life giver.
I think it's changed our life having it, really, because we spend most of our time outside, whereas we didn't before. We hardly used the grass. I mean, the kids have grown up, so they weren't using it for football anymore. It was just grass that John just had to keep cutting, or I keep cutting. So for us, it's just turned it into something, and it's more than we expected it would ever be.
It's like a home resort for us. It's like going on holiday out there. And again, I remember when we had the whole lockdown situation was going, again, it was very stressful for lots of people in lots of different ways. And particularly we had a business and suddenly the world shutting down and all the pressures of that. And then suddenly you'd go out there and you think, well, you just instantly find calm and relaxation and just connect with nature. And again, a lot of people say about how that mental health is enhanced through that. And I think it's really true, actually. I was never a massive believer in all that sort of stuff. But actually, the more I've got into it, I'm 100% converted to it.
And you don't have to have a massive garden, because you can build much, much smaller ones, sort of like the plunge pools. I mean, it's the same way we've done it, but you just, you don't have to have a big massive garden like we were lucky to have.
Yeah, and I think even on a much smaller scale, as a little pond or as a little wet habitat for nature, it's definitely enhances the space 100%.
If you were going to do it as a DIY project, is it tricky to get it so that you keep it clean? I mean, I don't know how yours kind of cleans or filters.
So the whole concept behind a natural pool is obviously moving away from the chemical process. So typically in a normal swimming pool, you're using a chlorine or some other form of high-powered sterilization. So effectively, you're swimming in a tub of bleach, for want of a better word. So no life can live in there effectively, which makes it, quote, healthier for swimming in. Whereas a natural pool is using nature as its cleansing process. So if you think about how water is cleaned in nature, so obviously as rain falls on the land, it soaks through the ground, through the aquifers, through the rock beds, and then eventually comes back into the rivers and the streams. And obviously as the water passes through that area, the beneficial bacteria break down and clean and enhance that water process. And effectively what a natural pool tries to do is replicate that process by creating a haven for beneficial bacteria to grow, which effectively with the plants clean the water. And the water's crystal clear, so it
doesn't work straight away. So when you first build it, that you first put the plants in, and you have to have a lot of plants. First put the plants in, and it's amazing, and you're like, oh god, this is heaven. Then a few months later, it all starts going green, because obviously the plants aren't mature enough to be doing the job they need to do. So it takes a while, that's another part of the wonderment of it, is that it's a slow process, and you have to trust the process, because early days you'd look out of the window and you'd be like, oh god, this is our worst nightmare, it's full of algae, it's horrible. But then one day you will wake up and the plants have matured and it's cleared it, and that is just such a wonderful feeling.
Yes, it's that combination of all those natural processes working, and then eventually the pond finds a natural balance whereby the amount of nutrients going in are taken out by the beneficial bacteria and the plants, and that whole cycle continues. It's really powerful when you think, the billions and billions of beneficial bacteria that then habitat in that pond. And these natural bacteria are everywhere, and all you try and do is give them a good home that helps create and grow them. And natural bacteria, these nitrifying bacteria, like to live on wetted surfaces and big surface areas. So rocks and gravel, and moving a body of water through that with the introduction of oxygen, again, helps that process, along with the biodiverse range of plant life you get in there, creates this amazing natural cleansing process. And it really does replicate how things work in nature.
I mean, I think anyone who's seen the pond will agree that it is just stunning. But did you find it tricky to find a balance between plants that were functional and plants that you wanted to work for you on an aesthetic level? Was that a bit of a balancing act?
The plants that work are the beautiful ones.
Well, it's like everything. It's a combination, actually, of finding the different types. So certain floating type plants do a certain role. Obviously, they help shade the water and prevent, obviously, a lot of the UV light going in there, which, again, can sometimes photosynthesize the algae to grow stronger. So, again, having some cover. Also, that then provides a good cover for insects and wildlife to sort of nest and protect themselves from, and a home for their eggs.
That's where the newts stay. So the newts don't swim around in the centre bit in the deep zone either. They stay in the regeneration zone. Yeah.
And then the reeds do another job. Again, they're really, really efficient at removing lots of nutrients from the water. And that's where, again, you see them in natural places and in waterworks. Again, it's been used for generations, using reeds and reed beds to filter water. So again, those types of reeds have a massive role to play, but they look stunning, you know.
Yes.
And again, we try to have a range of heights and depths. So I was trying to create a visual landscape through the space. So we had the higher reeds as a backdrop intermixed with some lower ones with the floating type plants. And then again, you get the oxygenators as well. And again, that, you know, live in the water, again, that produce, again, a lot more oxygen alongside the oxygen we introduce through an aquarium pump. So they all have a slightly different role. And then trying to do was then use a color combination as well and seasonally. So some plants come in, actually starting to come now in the springtime, and provide a certain bit of activity in the plants. They then start dropping off as the other ones start growing. And again, I was trying to keep a sort of color scheme going through there just to create some visual interest. So certainly no expert in any of this. It's very much trial and error and what we like. So again, the bedrock to it was trying to find a structure from a technical point of view that cleaned the water, I think, and then intermix that with the architectural features of the shape of the pool and the decking with the colors of the plants, understanding the roles they were trying to apply. And we're still constantly adjusting it now. So again, we've got some water mint in there now, which is nice. You can pick, you know, the mint and actually have that in the tea. It's just been a massive learning curve, I think. And
yeah, because obviously we've never done it before. So every step of it, you're learning as you go. And that's been quite nice.
Yeah, and we're not gardeners. So again, you know, it's... I have no understanding, or didn't have any understanding, from one plant to the next. So
it's funny because I didn't used to like doing the gardening at all, but now there's nothing better in the winter than putting my waders on and getting in and cutting back and clipping everything away in autumn. I absolutely love that because you're sort of pottering around in the water and that feels good.
Yeah, and it's funny how it enhances you.
It's a very brave decision to take. And I think maybe for some people, if they had gone into it with all the knowledge behind them, they wouldn't have done it, you know. So I think taking the plunge,
I agree.
Yeah, I think if I'd probably known now what I'd known then, I probably wouldn't have done it either. So it's got to be slightly insane probably to take on some of these projects. But
yeah, we are insane.
Yeah, well, life's a journey, as they say. And yeah.
I mean, did you need planning permission for it?
No, you don't. So if you're in a conservation area, you do. But for this, you didn't. So, yeah, no, I think generally it's encouraged natural waters in gardens, particularly I think now, because again, I collect the rainwater from the roof and use that to top up the pool with. And again, what tends to happen now, and I think that's why if you look at the latest building regulations and changes, you know, we're moving to much more of a permanent type of drainage system, whereby back in the day when you get heavy rains, it all rush off straight away, go into drains, and wash all those various different nutrients into the water courses, which have been very bad, whereby if you can hold the water on property, let it percolate naturally, that's much more beneficial for lots of different areas. So by holding that water and topping up the pond, you're then taking pressure off the other stormwater drains, which prevents all that massive runoff, which is very damaging to agriculture and to the water courses.
Because it's full of rainwater, it's only rainwater in there. So we had to wait quite a long time for it to fill up. But not too bad because we're in the UK, but it's just, there's no tap in there.
No. So literally you don't want to use tap water because, again, you get a lot of chlorine in there. You've got nitrates and all sorts of different things and phosphorus that's in the water supply, which, again, is good at sterilizing our drinking water, but it's not great when you're trying to create an ecosystem that's relying on beneficial bacteria to work with the natures. So as Caroline was saying, we use only rainwater to fill it up with, and that's a very soft, you know, the pH is lovely in there. It feels very neutral, very similar to your skin.
It's such a lovely swim. My mum, I don't know if you've seen it on any of our Instagram, but she's 89 and she swims in it regularly. And she actually says it feels so different to her sort of leisure centre where she swims. So she'll come over often and swim in there, and she's swimming around with the lilies, and she says it's exhilarating, and it is. The water feels very, very different to swimming in a swimming pool.
Yeah, and that's because the pH is much more in tune with your own skin. You're not relying on harsh chemicals. So it's a very natural thing to be doing.
I've got to ask the question, and sometimes you're getting in there and your videos, I'm finding them quite terrifying on your behalf because it looks freezing. I mean, you must have got hardened to this over the time, but does it ever get any easier to plunge into it when it's really cold?
You do adapt 100% actually, but yeah, I'm not saying that sometimes I do, you know, is those moments, but actually the more you do it, you do find the body does adapt. It's a psychological thing actually. And I think it's also, you know, I'm a big fan of watching the Wim Hof stuff. And again, it is all very much a mindset.
And the breathing is very important because you kind of got into the cold showers as we were building it. So you get your body used to the freezing and you're expecting it. I think it's when you're not expecting something to be quite so cold, and we know it's going to be cold, but that feeling when you get out of the water, it's exhilarating.
Oh yeah, you are.
It's a legal high, literally.
Yeah.
You feel amazing.
Yeah, it really does. I thoroughly recommend it, actually. And it is a journey because you have to overcome. So you have to set your mind to do things that are uncomfortable. And I think that's really good for us.
That's good for our mental health.
Because I think, too often our lives are too easy, aren't they, in some ways? So giving your body these natural stressors is actually really healthy. Because I think we're bombarded daily through the internet, our phones, our diet. Our body's then reacting to these things as a stress and doesn't really quite know how to respond to it. But if you give it a natural stress, it's amazing how powerful that is. So I'm a massive convert to it.
So obviously you've got your Instagram and you've also got TikTok, which you mentioned. If people wanted to find out more about your journey, where would be the best places to follow you? Is it on those channels?
On those channels. We did start a YouTube channel, but we didn't sort of continue with it. It's just easier for me. I mean, I've really loved the creative side of putting the films together. And it's all on there. So Instagram and TikTok, really.
And then she loves it. She's really good at it, actually. It's not my thing, but she's utterly brilliant at telling the stories and showing what I've done. So without her, we wouldn't have captured all that, actually, because I would have just sort of built it in isolation. But the fact we've got that record of it now has been quite amazing. And actually, it was my birthday a few months ago, and Caroline bought me this sort of amazing book whereby she took all the photos and turned it into a little book. And it's quite moving, actually, seeing the journey and the experiences with the kids and how we built it, and some of the stunning pictures she's taken around there. It's like, wow, feels quite proud to have that.
And we've got a memory of it forever. And also for us as a couple, it was a really lovely thing to do together, because obviously we were both working and it was weekends, evenings. John obviously did the lion's share of it, but it was a really bonding thing for us because, obviously you have the normal rows over. I mean, John is the most untidy worker, so he's very creative, clearly, but he works in such a disorganized fashion. So my job was kind of going round without moaning or nagging and just picking up all the crap that was being sort of tossed around the house, the garden, and then providing the wine at the end of the day. So
really nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad it worked out well, because I imagine it could have otherwise ended in divorce.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, very easily. Yeah, no. The trouble is the rest of the house now gone to rack and ruin. So, I've got to try and do some work finding, because again, the house, we've been here for about 15, 16 years now. It's been untouched. We spend all the time in the garden.
Everyone online says, we'd love a house tour. And I'm thinking, no, you wouldn't. You wouldn't. It's terrible.
Oh, well, I look forward to seeing that journey next.
Yeah, I'll vow to do the bathroom now. So, that's my next little project.
Smoke and mirrors with us.
Yeah, well done. I mean, it's a wonderful achievement, and it's a lovely thing to witness you moving through that and using that space. And I'm grateful that you've documented it, because it's a really, really lovely thing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Caroline and John for taking part in this interview. And as always, thank you to you for listening. And in fact, by the time you hear this, the podcast will have achieved its millionth download. So an especially big thank you for supporting, sharing and listening to the podcast. And thank you to all the guests who've shared their knowledge and passion so freely. The million download figure doesn't mean much in real terms, but personally, to think the podcast started as the seed of an idea, a microphone and a recording device, and to be honest, it hasn't changed much since then. It just shows what can be achieved with not much at all. So please take inspiration from the giant pond makers and the million downloads and go forth and create if it's something you desire. You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All Podcast.